now dealt with amplitude, period, and horizontal shifts for sine and cosine. Now we're going to add one more, and this is the last one, and it's vertical shifts. So let's look at the general form for sine and cosine. We've got a fourth letter. Oh, first of all, I'll just let you know, we're not going to combine horizontal and vertical shifts. In the great wide world of math, that certainly happens, and that is something that you may cover in another course, but it is not anything we're going to worry about. We're going to either do a horizontal shift or a vertical. We're not going to do both at once. So A still represents amplitude. B still helps you find your period. You do 2 pi over B. The horizontal shift would be C over B. And then D is your vertical shift. So D represents your vertical shift. If D is positive, shift D units up. If D is negative, shift D units down. Okay, so the point is you got to shift up and down, and I'll explain more as we're going through some examples here. So let's start with this one, 1/2 cosine of x minus 1. Okay, so we don't have to worry about horizontal. We know it's going to start at 0, and it's going to have its normal shape. Okay, now I'm going to draw what normal cosine of x looks like. It looks something like this. But what this tells us right here is that we're shifting this entire thing down. So normally, our cosine would go from 1/2 down to negative 1/2. Okay, because its amplitude is 1/2. But we're shifting it down 1. So you need to subtract 1 from both of those. So because we're subtracting 1, we need to shift both of these down. So 1/2 minus 1 gives you negative 1/2. And negative 1/2 minus 1 gives you negative 3/2. So it's going to be shifted down this much. You still need to mark its peak and its valley. And if you notice, its midpoint has moved too. Before, the midline here was at 0. This time, because we shifted down 1, it's at negative 1. So that's one new thing you should label when we have vertical shifts. That's the midline. The midline will just match whatever's right here. Okay? So now we need to mark our spots, but mark them on the x-axis. So 0, our period hasn't changed, so it's 2 pi. Our midpoint is pi. This will be pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And that actually corresponds to these spots right here. Okay, so I'm going to do that same problem again, and we're going to take it from our more normal approach. So you can see a couple different ways to attack this. So the amplitude here is 1/2. The period is 2 pi, because it's 2 pi over 1. And the shift is down 1. Okay, I want you to notice something here. Parentheses matter. If this problem had had parentheses around here, then that would have been a horizontal shift. When you're inside the parentheses, it's a horizontal shift. When you're outside the parentheses, it's a vertical shift. So since there are no parentheses there, that minus 1 is a vertical shift. It shifts it down 1. So let's draw this again. So normally the midline is at 0. However, we've been shifted down 1. So one way you could start is by marking negative 1 and drawing your midline. Now you know, based on the amplitude being 1/2, that you should go up 1/2 from there and down 1/2 from there. And cosine has this basic shape. Since the period is 2 pi, you know it ends at 2 pi. In the middle we'd have pi, 3 pi over 2, and 1 pi over 2. So that's one other way you can approach that. And next, let's look at the 3 sine of x plus 2. Its amplitude is 3. Its period is 2 pi, because it's just 2 pi over 1, because there's an understood 1 in front of the x. And again, since this is outside the parentheses, it's a vertical shift, so we shift up 2. So we shift up 2 units. Okay, so normally our midline is here at 0, but we've been shifted up 2 units. So our midline is right there at 2 units. Okay, now based on the amplitude, we know we should go up 3 and down 3. So we're going to range now, instead of from -3 to +3, from -1 to +5. And sine has this basic shape. I realize my picture's not really pretty, but yours don't have to be perfect either, as long as you've got the right things labeled and you've got the right basic shape. Because this should peak at 5, and it should go down to -1. Tell you what, I think I am going to rewrite that just so it looks a little bit more even. Let's see if we can do this a little better. Okay, so again, our midline is at 2, so we'll just mark 1, 2. That's our midline. Because our amplitude is 3, that tells us we go up 3 and down 3. And then sine is shaped like this. And we can mark our special spots. Okay, the endpoint is 2 pi, because that's our period. The midpoint, which corresponds to this right here, is at pi. The maximum, which corresponds to this, is pi over 2. The minimum is going to be at 3 pi over 2. So notice, labeling the x-axis really isn't any different when we're doing this shift. It's really more about the y-axis that we have to worry about it. And that's because it's a vertical shift and not a horizontal shift. Okay, next up, 4 cosine of 1/2 x minus 3. The amplitude would be 4, because that's the number in front of cosine. The period, I believe, is going to be 4 pi, because we do 2 pi over 1/2. Again, we get the 1/2 from there, and that is in fact 4 pi. And our shift, since that's outside the parentheses, it's vertical, so it shifts down 3. Okay, so let's draw this. We're going to be shifting down 3. So I'm going to shift down 1, 2, 3. That's my new midline. And because my amplitude is 4, I know I can go up 4 to +1 or down 4 to -7. And because of the shape of cosine, I start up at the top, go down, and then come back up to where I started. My period this time is 4 pi, so that's my end point. In the middle would be 2 pi, in between that would be pi and 3 pi, because those spots should correspond to where you hit your midline and your minimum. Okay, last one. -2 sine of x, sine of 2 pi x plus 5. Our amplitude is 2. Remember, amplitude is always the absolute value of that number out front. Period is 2 pi over 2 pi, so just 1. And then since this is outside of the parentheses, it's a shift up, so we shift, or it's a vertical shift, and because it's positive, it's up. Shift up 5 units. So our new midline should be at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And because our amplitude is 2, we know we can go up 2 or down 2. Notice there's a negative sign out front, so I have to kind of flip the shape of sine. I go down first instead of up. And it should look something like this. Now my period is 1. So my end point right there is at 1. My halfway point is 1/2. And then the other two spots I need to mark are 1/4 and 3/4, because these need to correspond to the important spots: the minimum, where you cross your midline, the maximum, and the end point. So hopefully that's helpful, help you understand the vertical shifts. You can find some practice problems for these on page 506, number 51 through 58.